I have not been able to stop talking about Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. A few months ago, I wouldn't have even considered playing a Metal Gear game. The only frame of reference I had for what the series was about was seeing Solid Snake in Super Smash Bros. And that one Psycho Mantis scene where he infamously breaks the fourth wall. Cut to 2 months ago. My favorite video essayist, Jacob Geller, uploads a video titled Revengeance is Immortal, about a game I never previously cared about or wanted to try. After watching that video, however, I was intrigued. I tried playing Revengeance, and oh boy. I was not expecting a game about a sleek robot ninja to yield my next video essay topic, but here we are. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is a game where you play as Raiden, a killing machine optimized for slicing his enemies into a million pieces. Throughout the game, Raiden is portrayed as a hero, capable of overcoming any evil and surmounting all obstacles. He is depicted as a near-invincible threat, fighting for justice in a broken world. In most of the early missions, he takes on enemies under the organization Maverick Security Consulting, backed by his friends in high places. He enlists the help of Doctor, a medical expert who is well-versed in Raiden cybernetics, as well as Kevin Washington, who is a military strategist. These allies assist Raiden when he is in need of information and combat advice, and are close friends. However, in the mission RO3 Mile High, Raiden resigns. He departs from the people who consistently had his back and takes on a lone wolf siege upon a world marshal, his greatest enemy. He is going to storm the enemy's base of operations, alone. The sequence that follows this choice is outstanding. I've never seen anything like it. Raiden walks through the city, en route to the enemy headquarters, surrounded by screens akin to New York City. There are television screens everywhere, and suddenly they're all occupied by the face of your enemy, Sam. Now, Sam is smart. To overcome Raiden, he doesn't send out troops to meet the blade that has already proven itself capable of slaughter. Instead, Sam gets in Raiden's head. He surrounds Raiden both literally and mentally, reminding him of every person he killed in the name of justice. This idea of justice is a shield for Raiden's conscience, preventing him from having to feel bad about the men he dismembers. It's what keeps him a hero, rather than a war machine. He hides behind this notion of one sword keeps another in the sheath, but Sam sees straight through his excuses. Your sword longs to bathe in the blood of your enemies, but you hold it back. He goes on to say that the people Raiden has been killing so flippantly didn't even have a choice in being here. They aren't soldiers. They're people in poverty who were promised a better life. People who just wanted to provide for their family during their country's civil war. To fulfill World Marshal's dirty work, they were sent onto the battlefield as cyborgs to die, at Raiden's blade. This is the first domino, the first crack in Raiden's sense of self. Raiden is not the only one affected by Sam's words. As Sam is describing the cyborgs Raiden has been killing, he explains that their pain receptors are shut down, pumped full of fear-inhibiting nanomachines, and sent right into the blender. Your blender. But they made their choice, right? As a player, this line hits especially close to home, because of a certain mechanic called Blade Mode. In Raiden's Blade Mode, the player slices an enemy in quick succession, cutting them into hundreds of pieces. It even keeps track of how many pieces the enemy has been sliced into. It becomes almost like a mini-game for the player to see how high that number can go. It doesn't feel like you're dismembering a person. It feels like you're creating an intricate paper snowflake. Sam pointing out that several of the people that were split into pieces by our hand were innocent is not only a blow toward Raiden, it's a blow toward us. We control the blade. We continue to activate Blade Mode when the target is already destroyed. We are the blender. In this moment, Sam removes the distance we put between ourselves and the Raiden we are piloting. We are both forced to think and reevaluate our motivations. Revengeance is not the only game that attempts this meta-narrative. Spec Ops: The Line, a game released in 2012, asks the player the same question. Are you desensitized to the violence you are committing as this character? It is a game that places you into morally gray situations and forces you to make a choice. Will you commit the war atrocities needed to survive? Or will you die on the battlefield? It is a game that is known for questioning the motivation of its players. Instead of gameplay tips, loading screens are littered with quotes like, "If you were a better person, you wouldn't be here." And, "Do you feel like a hero yet?" Though radical for its time, Spec Ops: The Line's gimmick is blatant. It is a game that hands you a match, forces you to light the fuse of a bomb, then points its finger at you and shames you for making that decision. Although, you weren't even given the choice to light that fuse. You couldn't pull your hand away, you couldn't snuff the flame of the match, the game grabs your wrist and yanks it down toward the fuse. Because you can't say no, your lighting of the fuse was not a choice. It was scripted. I believe this is where Revengeance's mechanics shine. In Revengeance, you do not have to cut your enemies into a million pieces. For most enemies, you can finish them off with a few strikes and be done with it. You do not have to overkill. And yet, the game's mechanics subtly reward you for shredding enemies with the piece counter, which is brilliant because the game gives us a chance to be brutal, and without fail we take it. We strike the match. We lower our hand. We light the fuse, all of our own volition. We become that blender. The second domino falls when Raiden stumbles through the city, the last thoughts of his victims echoing in his head. Statements like, "I almost have enough money to bring Mama to the States," and "Please, don't let me die," tug at the edges of his definition of heroism, causing unparalleled levels of cognitive dissonance. His doubts about who he really is, what he really stands for, physically weaken him, until he can barely lift his sword. He falls to his knees at the doors of World Marshal's office. He is vulnerable. He is alone. This solitude doesn't last for long. Sam and the next boss, Monsoon, stand at the front steps, looking down on Raiden's internal conflict. Monsoon continues to afflict Raiden with uncertainty, asking him, who saves the weak from the man who saves the weak? Who will stand in the way of a harbinger of justice? And it is justice, Monsoon claims, that has spared him the burden of all the lives he's taken, absolved him of guilt when he enjoyed it. Due to this ideology of justice, Raiden has no choices to make, nothing to answer for. He can die with a clear conscience. In thinking of himself as a hero, the means to a just end are overlooked. Ironically, he commits violence to prevent violence, or so he believes. But now, Monsoon taunts, the illusion is broken. Raiden cannot divert his eyes from the humans he turned into corpses. The realization that he is not as good as he once believed is heavy. In this moment, Monsoon makes a bold claim that you are like us after all. This statement is surprisingly truthful. Like his enemies at World Marshal, Raiden will stop at nothing to enforce his own definition of justice, even if it costs the lives of those who oppose him. He's very much like the people he's been fighting, the people he has demonized into monsters. In this scene, Raiden's hero persona is shattered. He cannot be both a defender of justice and a man who takes innocent lives. He cannot be what heroism asks for. And thus, he converts back to the persona who has protected him ever since his days as a child soldier. He becomes Jack the Ripper. Raiden's Jack the Ripper persona is an embodiment of his brokenness. It is a manifestation of his childhood self staring his oppressors in the eyes, and actually being able to do something about the evil in the world. It is a raw necessity of doing whatever it takes to survive, to kill or be killed. For months, Raiden has masked the Liberian child who just wants to see tomorrow. As Jack, Raiden relishes the pain inflicted upon him, stating that it is his normal, his nature. It is why he fights. Although the scene of reawakening Jack the Ripper seems like a villain origin story, the codec call after Monsoon's fight reveals the context of his persona. Raiden pats a gaping wound on his chest, coating his fingers with his own blood. He finally feels the pain that has been suppressed for so long, reacquainting himself with the experience of being human. He lifts his blood-stained fingers and with shaky breaths mutters, "I don't want this for anyone else." Raiden has been through pain that could have easily turned him into a villain. He could become the true namesake of Jack the Ripper, killing those who don't deserve it for his own personal pleasure. With his power, he could kill just because it feels good. But then he would be no different from his oppressors. Raiden uses his power to protect those without it. He's deeply acquainted with hopelessness. He knows what it feels like to have nobody coming to help. And thus, he becomes what he needed as a child. A protector, who will go through anything and anyone to defend the weak. Although Raiden's violent persona may seem out of character for the hero who saves the weak, I would argue it's what first made him a hero. What first gave him the courage to fight back. After everything Raiden has done, unwittingly killing the innocent, wielding his blade so another can stay in the sheath, all of the people he's hurt, is he a hero? What does it mean to be a hero? Michael Balkan speaks of the origin of the word hero on his Motivational Notes website. In ancient Greek, the word heros meant protector. Not tough guy or killer of bad guys, but protector. A hero has strength for two. There's no denying that Raiden committed great violence. And yet, he does whatever it takes to protect everyone he can. Raiden knows he can't save everyone, that would be an impossible goal. He saves all in his power, though. His main goal in Mission R03 is saving the brains of children going through training to become child soldiers. To become him. Raiden wants to make sure not one child becomes like him. He doesn't want this for anyone else. There is a child he rescues from this training, named George, who looks up to Raiden. He thinks Raiden is the coolest thing since sliced bread. And although the cybernetic ninja is all dark and brooding at times, he does have a soft spot for children. George specifically. During a cutscene at the beginning of Mission R03, he gets on a FaceTime call with George, who's recovering from a recent wound. George asks about his current objective and how he's disappointed that Raiden didn't bring him along. With heaviness in his heart, Raiden reminds the child that killing isn't fun in games. Remember that. In this scene, it's clear that Raiden doesn't want another Raiden. Even though it disappoints George, he speaks firmly and with sobriety. He doesn't want anyone else to have to go through the trauma that made him a protector, that gave him the strength for two. In the final cutscene of Revengeance, we get to see the effects of Raiden's role as a protector. We get to see children exist, peacefully. Two children Raiden saved, George and Sunny, are just living. Raiden's war machine dog is laying under the desk sleeping. George has a new prosthetic arm and is putting it to use by carrying boxes. The child prodigy Sunny is working on her next blueprints for a spaceship. Life is quiet and soft. The two kids muse about Raiden, appreciating his efforts on their behalf. Sunny speaks. He rescued me too, you know. Saved my life. I owe him everything. To some people, he'll always be Jack the Ripper. She stops in deep thought. I know all about his past. He had it rough and he hurt a lot of people. But that's not the Raiden I know. The Raiden I know is a hero. This is the most peaceful scene in the game. Before now, each moment of respite has been interrupted by violence, shattered so quickly. Even the scenes with children had urgent stakes and threats looming on the horizon. But this moment, at the very end of the game, is enveloped in total, undisturbed peace. Peace that was only achieved due to Raiden's violence. He did what he had to in order to protect these children. The means to the end was ugly, and the base violence necessary for change cost many lives, but peace for all came from the sacrifices of the few. Though broken and bruised, despite the raging war in his psyche, due to Raiden's heroism, new life was born beneath the bloodstained sand.
Looking down on the cars on the highway, win.